Can you imagine someone handling nearly $1 trillion a day? And what if that person was the city's youngest and most profitable trader? Gary Stevenson did just that. His book, The Trading Game, 2024, is a gripping account of his extraordinary journey from the streets of East London to the pinnacle of London's financial district. But this isn't just a success story. Stevenson unveils the dark reality of a banking culture where success means betting on economic collapse, where winning can feel like losing, and where quitting risks everything. In today's volatile financial climate, this book is more relevant than ever for understanding the true nature of high finance. In this summary, you'll discover what the world of high-stakes trading truly looks like from behind the curtain. We'll explore the intense pressures and incentives that drive traders' decisions and uncover why Gary Stevenson ultimately walked away from the very system that catapulted him to success. You'll get a no-fluff, practical glimpse into a side of the financial world that's rarely seen. Lesson 1. Looking through lampposts, unconventional paths to financial acumen. Let me tell you a story about someone who stared at success from a distance and then sprinted toward it, even when the odds went in his favor. Picture this: a young boy growing up in a gritty neighborhood of East London. At one end of his street, there's a lamppost and a weather-beaten telegraph pole. They're not just street fixtures. To him and his friends, they're goalposts for football matches played on cracked pavement. But beyond those makeshift goals in the distance, he can see something else. Rising from the horizon like a mirage, the glass towers of Canary Wharf, a different world, of wealth, power, and sharp suits. And deep down, even as a kid, he knows, somehow, he's going to break into that world. This isn't just a rags to riches story. It's about grit, hustle, and how sometimes the smartest moves aren't made in spreadsheets, but on the streets. Child, money wasn't just currency. It was a symbol of control, of escape. Once, he dropped a coin and spent ages crawling under parked cars and digging through drains just to find it. Not because he loved money for money's sake, but because it mattered. When you grow up, watching every pound get stretched, saved, or spent with hesitation, you learn early how much even a single coin is worth. By age 12, he was already buying sweets in bulk and selling them for profit at school. The next year, he delivered newspapers in the rain for a few pounds a week. By 16, the hustle had turned a little darker, selling things he shouldn't have, and it got him expelled. But even that didn't stop him. See, talent has a way of finding cracks in closed doors. His gift for numbers, for strategy, earned him a spot at one of the world's top economic schools. But here's the twist. He wasn't surrounded by people like him anymore. His classmates were kids of billionaires and tycoons, private jets, family foundations, wealth on a whole different level. And yet, instead of shrinking, he sharpened. When you don't come from privilege, you learn to make your own rules. That's where the trading game comes in. It was a student competition. Think of it as Wall Street meets poker night. Every player got a random card, and the challenge was to trade with others and make the most money. Most students tried to play it safe, calculating probabilities like textbook traders. But not this guy. He watched them, learned their habits, and then found the gaps in their logic, buying from one, selling to another, flipping deals like a street-smart chess player. Then came the finals, and luck, as it often does, played a cruel hand. He drew the worst card possible, negative value. Most people would fold, but he didn't. He bluffed, he sold high, acted bold, played the part of a man with a winning card. It was risky. It was gutsy. He lost big. But the judges weren't watching the score. They were watching the mindset, the ability to stay cool under fire, to lead the room, to believe in your play even when the data says otherwise. That's what real trading is about. And that's what won him the job. Fast forward to his first day on the trading floor. The place is buzzing. Phones ringing, screens flashing, accents from across the globe shouting bids and numbers. But there's no orientation, no hand-holding. If you want to be valuable here, you make yourself valuable. So what does he do? He finds the quietest, most respected trader in the room, a guy known for keeping to himself, and starts showing up every morning with a cappuccino. No small talk, no grand gestures. Just consistency, respect, humility. After a week of silent toffee deliveries, the man finally nods and says, "Sit with me." That's it. The door opens. He's in, because sometimes opportunity doesn't look like a promotion. It looks like a moment. And if you know how to read people as well as you read numbers, those moments multiply. On the last day of his internship, he's given a seemingly simple task: coordinate lunch for the entire trading floor. But here's the catch. Hundreds of people, different orders, tight timing, 0 mistakes. Most interns might panic, but he remembers something: waking up before dawn to deliver newspapers in the cold. That experience, something so mundane, so ordinary, turns out to be the perfect prep. He crushes it. That afternoon, the head of the desk casually asks, "You got a passport?" He nods. The reply? "Go home and get it. You're going skiing." Translation: welcome to the club. You're not just an intern anymore. You're part of the team. This story isn't just about finance. It's about what happens when raw hunger meets opportunity, and how the lessons we learn hustling on the street can carry just as much weight as those learned in boardrooms. It's proof that intelligence isn't just academic, it's emotional, social, strategic, and that in the right hands, a tough beginning isn't a setback. It's a competitive edge. Because while some people are born into the skyscrapers, others climb, step by step, sail by sail, risk by risk, from the sidewalk. And sometimes, that climb starts with a football game between 2 lampposts, and ends with a seat on the trading floor. Lesson 2. Bank robbery in broad daylight. Navigating crisis and ambition. Every career begins somewhere. For Gary, it started on a trading floor filled with adrenaline, absurd egos, and lessons no textbook could ever teach. But he didn't just learn to trade money, he learned how the game changes you. In his first year, Gary wasn't just deciphering currencies or bond yields. There was Rupert, loud, temperamental, and impossible to predict. Shop. Then there was Bill, the quiet one who said little but noticed everything. And Spengler, who looked like he belonged in a physics lab more than a trading room, yet somehow made trades that always clicked. Each one of them became a mirror, showing Gary who he might become, or who he should avoid becoming. Then the world changed. It was September 2008. Lehman Brothers collapsed, and the global economy started crumbling like a house of cards. For most people, it felt like watching the world end. But on the trading floor, there were no tears, there were cheers. Why? Because chaos creates profit. As banks froze lending and trust vanished, the gap between what people were willing to buy and sell for, the spread, exploded. And that spread, that was where traders made money. Lots of it. While the news showed images of families losing homes and bankers sobbing on Wall Street, Gary's colleagues were pulling in millions. He quickly absorbed a brutal truth of this world. Disaster doesn't scare traders. It excites them, but with profit came poison. Not long after, Gary saw a darker side of trading culture up close. Spengler, the eccentric genius, had secretly shifted $3 million from Rupert's trading account into his own. It was like stealing someone else's scoreboard. When the scandal broke, Spengler was quietly removed. No shouting, no handcuffs. Just gone. And from the silence, Bill gave Gary a lesson he'd never forget. Cover your ass. It wasn't just advice, it was survival. In this world, mistakes are fatal, and trust is thin. From that day on, Gary operated with eyes in the back of his head. Then came a surprise. Caleb, the head trader, and the man who had once handpicked Gary, announced he was retiring. At 29. He wasn't sick. He wasn't forced out. He just wanted to build a house in California and leave it all behind. He'd made enough. Gary was stunned. That most people can't even picture. And he did it before turning 30. And in that moment, something clicked in Gary. If Caleb could cash out that young, why couldn't he? Enter Chuck Mathieson. A big Canadian with a voice like gravel and the emotional range of a potato. he took over the desk after Caleb. Their first meeting, awkward, doesn't begin to cover it. As Chuck flipped through a swimsuit magazine, no joke, he casually asked Gary what he did on the team. That's when Gary did something bold. He lied. Without skipping a beat, he said, "I'm the Swiss franc trader, Chuck." He wasn't. But now, he was. That night, he made it real. He jumped into his first major trade, a $1 billion currency swap between US dollars and Swiss francs. And just like that, a lie became a legacy. But this wasn't just ambition. Gary had a plan. A calculated, deeply personal plan written on 2 identical sheets of paper. At the top of both, in thick ink, he'd scribbled $12 million. Beneath it, he listed 5 trades, 5 strategic moves that would get him there. One sheet stayed tucked in his desk drawer at work, the other hidden in his underwear drawer at home. This wasn't a wish, it was a blueprint. And it worked. By the end of the year, he wasn't just a success. He was a record breaker. The first junior trader in the bank's history to make over $10 million in year 1. But it wasn't the trades that changed him. It was what came next. Bonus day. Chuck slid a piece of paper across the desk with a number written on it. Pound 395. 0. Nearly 4 times more than Gary expected. Enough to make someone blink, enough to make Gary leave the room. He walked out, numb, into a small park sandwiched between skyscrapers. The air was sharp with January cold. And as he sat there, the number rattled in his head. He thought about his father. 35 years working in the post office for £20 a year. About the kids he'd grown up with, sharing pound coins and pocket change. And now, he'd earned almost $500,000 for moving numbers on a screen. Something shifted inside him. Not guilt. Not even pride. Just a realization this was possible. And if this was possible, why stop? From that moment, Gary's mindset flipped. It wasn't about earning money anymore. It was about taking it. About seeing finance for what it really was. A legal form of bank robbery. And he was going to grab every penny he could. Lesson 3. Clawing back from disaster. Lessons in risk, resilience, and market shocks. On the surface, Bill didn't look like a mentor. He was a quiet Liverpudlian with a face that rarely smiled and a voice that barely rose above a growl. But on the trading floor, Bill was a master. And for Gary, he became something more valuable than a boss. He became a compass. Bill wasn't into flashy wins or loud trades. His strategy was all about staying alive. Where others chased the biggest risk for the biggest return, Bill played the long game. He built trades that could survive any storm. Profit whether the market rose, crashed, or spun sideways. One of his favorite warnings: don't go pig on pork. Translation: don't bet the same idea across 10 different markets, just because it feels clever. Diversification isn't about variety in name. It's about real, uncorrelated bets. Gary soaked it all in. But while Gary was learning how to manage risk on the screen, his personal life was entering unfamiliar territory. For months, he'd wrestled with the question: should he tell anyone how much he made? When you're a 20-something with a nearly £500,000 bonus, it's not just a number. It's a force. A secret too heavy to carry and too dangerous to reveal. One evening, in the dim light of his girlfriend's apartment, Gary finally said it. £395,000. Her reaction wasn't joy. It wasn't even surprise. It was stillness. Her face froze. Her eyes widened unnaturally, like she was staring at someone she no longer recognized. And in that silence, Gary knew he shouldn't have said it. They broke up months later, but the distance started in that moment, with the number hanging in the air like smoke. He tried again, this time with friends. Childhood friends. The kind who'd known him when he was broke, awkward, and obsessed with football. They were gathered in someone's living room, fingers tapping controllers, the PlayStation humming in the background. One of them, also working in finance, casually asked, "So, you get a bonus?" Gary hesitated. Then, with a forced smile, "Yeah, $395. Silence. One controller slipped and hit the floor. After that, things were never quite the same. Not hostile. Just different. Like the invisible gap between them had suddenly become real. Then came a real crisis. It started like any other quiet night. Champions League football on TV, a cold drink, a friend on the couch. But then Gary's phone buzzed. A New York number. He picked up. Voice on the other end belonged to a senior trader, someone Gary privately called the Frog. A cryptic accent, a sharp brain, and a history of big plays. The Frog had a tip. A huge opportunity in Swiss francs. Gary didn't hesitate. He took a $200 million position. One of the biggest trades of his life. A few days later, the Swiss National Bank did something no one saw coming. They slashed interest rates to -5%. That's right. They would literally pay people to borrow Swiss francs. The market went into freefall. Gary's trade unraveled. Within days, he was staring at a red number, 8 million. And instead of cutting his losses, he held on. No. Worse. He doubled down. He believed he was right. The fundamentals made sense. The market would correct. He just needed to survive long enough for it to happen. But the pain kept growing. Eventually, the bank stepped in and forcibly closed the trade at $4. 2 million loss. Then, cruelly, as if mocking him, the market reversed. Completely. Gary's original position would have been a massive win, if only he'd lasted a little longer. From that wreckage, Gary emerged with 2 rules, not slogans, rules to live by. Rule 1, be right in the end. Rule 2, be alive at the end. You can't just have good ideas. You have to survive long enough for those ideas to prove themselves. Gary had nearly blown himself up. But he wasn't done. From that moment, he went into overdrive, in early every morning, studying late, expanding his reach into US dollar markets, rebuilding his reputation trade by trade. By the end of the year, he wasn't in the red anymore. He was up, a full $5 million swing from where he'd started. Then came the reward. He was in Singapore, walking under glowing towers and humid skies, when his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't the Frog. It was the desk, the number. £420. More than his previous bonus. More than he thought he deserved after. The mess he'd survived. But that's the paradox of trading. It doesn't reward safety. It rewards resilience. And Gary, he was still standing. Lesson 4. The Frog and the Shoe. Navigating hostility, contrarian views and immense pressure. 2011. Gary returned from Singapore riding high, second bonus in hand, confidence peaking. But the moment he walked back onto the trading floor, something felt off. The sturdy desk, once parked proudly by the windows with a skyline view, had been moved. Physically, pushed to the center of the room. Symbolic, yes, but it wasn't just about geography. The soul of the desk was changing. Bill, his mentor, his anchor, was stepping back into semi-retirement. And Gary, he wasn't inheriting Bill's sterling book as expected. Instead, he was handed the junior euro portfolio. And worst of all, his new boss, the Frog. Yes, the same New York trader who'd handed him the poison Swiss francs trade. By now, Gary had connected the dots. The Frog had offloaded a risky position, knowing it could collapse. And Gary had been the fall guy. Now, he was expected to sit next to him. Every single day. Their working relationship, toxic from the start. The Frog barely masked his disdain. And Gary? He buried the resentment. But it burned. Still, this was finance. Emotion didn't pay. Performance did. So Gary focused. The junior euro role was relentless. Not like other portfolios, where a handful of well-placed bets could carry the year. This was volume-heavy, high-pressure, hundreds of positions a day. Pure speed. Pure stress. But Gary showed up, day after day, before dawn, drenched in sweat, still in his cycling clothes, often too wired to even change. He'd become a machine, and underneath that frenzy, a philosophy was forming. One rule: don't just be right. Be right when others are wrong. The entire street, analysts, banks, journalists, was betting on recovery. Interest rates going up, economies bouncing back. Gary saw something else: widening inequality, wage stagnation, fragile demand, For him, the writing was on the wall. Interest rates weren't going anywhere. In fact, they'd stay low for a long, long time. A lonely bet, but devastatingly accurate. And then the world unraveled. Again, March 2011. A massive earthquake struck Japan. Thousands died. Entire towns were washed away. Markets went into panic. Gary made $11 million. Later that same year, Europe began to fracture. Greece, Spain, Italy, each teetering on the edge of default. The Eurozone shook with uncertainty. And Gary, he was there again, deep in the chaos, making money where others froze. The European Central Bank's response? Radical. They flooded the banks with cheap 1% loans, unlimited amounts. The market spun into wild volatility. Gary thrived. At one point, he was moving €1 trillion a day, more than the GDP of most countries. He wasn't just surviving the storm, he was shaping it. By year-end, he'd made over $35 million for the bank. But no matter how good the numbers looked, his relationship with the frog was rotting from the inside. When bonus talks came around, the frog dropped a bomb. He might not approve Gary's full payout. Gary wasn't one to beg. He began quietly interviewing with rival firms, Goldman, Barclays, hedge funds. And when he got offers, he left their business cards on the frog's desk. No words, just a message. Eventually, he got the number he wanted, $2. $45 million. Roughly 7% of the profits he brought in. But it didn't feel like a win. He bought a luxury apartment, waterfront, floor-to-ceiling glass, a view that screamed success. But inside, nothing. No furniture, no art, just a mattress on the floor, a TV, blank walls, and emptier energy. The trading floor had bled into his life. All function, no soul. And one day, it all cracked. The frog was yelling, again. Some missed meeting, some excuse to unload his fury. Gary stood there, looking down at his shoes. His trainers worn at the sides. Holes where his pinky toes rubbed against the fabric. And through those holes, red socks. His favorite team, Leyton Orient, stitched right into them. That's when it hit him. He was a millionaire, a man who moved billions daily, and he hadn't even noticed the holes in his own shoes. He hadn't noticed himself. His voice cut through the shouting. Boss, I don't think I can do this anymore. I think I need to quit. Lesson 5. Traps and Delusions. A trader's unconventional economic insight. Gary almost quit. After years of stress, toxic bosses, and millions earned through trading chaos, he was done. But Citibank didn't want to lose him, a new role in Tokyo, working under his old mentor, Caleb, on his last day in London. As he stepped off but Gary didn't look back. He walked straight ahead, eyes fixed on something far beyond the trading screens, beyond the flashing tickers and spreadsheets. He was chasing something else now. By this time, Gary had discovered a secret. Not some get-rich trick, although, to be fair, it had made him filthy rich. No, this was a secret about the world. While experts on CNBC kept arguing about whether the economic recovery would be V-shaped or U-shaped, Gary saw the truth. There was no recovery coming. Not now. Not ever. Because this wasn't just a recession, it was a trap. Gary had noticed something the economists and central bankers refused to admit. When the middle class loses spending power, the economy can't grow. No matter how much stimulus you pump in, if the average person can't afford anything beyond rent and groceries, there's no fuel for growth. And when the economy doesn't grow, interest rates can't rise. They stay low, possibly forever. He bet on that. Billions. And he was right. The problem, Gary realized, was that the economic establishment, all those Ivy League analysts, Wall Street gurus, and government policymakers, still believed in an old model. They thought downturns were temporary, that things would bounce back. But Gary saw it differently. The system isn't broken temporarily. It's broken permanently. Central banks print money to keep the machine running. But that money, it never reaches the common man. It goes into assets, stocks. Stocks. bonds, real estate. And who owns those? The rich. Prices go up, rent increases, mortgages become heavier, but wages, they stay flat. The money flows one way, upward, from tenant to landlord, from borrower to bank, from worker to shareholder, and Gary had front row seats. He watched it unfold in real time on his Bloomberg terminal, like watching a digital heist. A silent one. The kind no one even notices. Back in Ilford, his hometown, the rusty lampposts they used as football goalposts still stood. But the people, they were struggling. His childhood friends were now adults, using up their entire salaries just to survive in overpriced homes. No savings, no security, no future. And Gary? He became a millionaire just by betting that these same friends would keep getting poorer. That's the paradox. One kid from East London retires at 26 because he understands that the economy is built on keeping people like his friends down. As his plane soared east toward Tokyo, Gary stared out the window. The city lights below, the silence above. He carried with him more than just his wealth. He carried a truth. A truth that explained his meteoric rise and the uncomfortable emptiness that came with it. He wasn't just beating the system. He was winning a game that maybe shouldn't be played at all. Lesson 6. Escaping purgatory, confronting corporate inertia and high-stakes severance. Have you ever had a job that slowly unraveled your sense of purpose, not through chaos or pressure, but through something worse? Numbness. Numbness. Imagine flying across the world for what should be a career breakthrough, a prestigious assignment in a buzzing financial hub. You land expecting energy, ambition, and high-stakes deals. Instead, you walk into silence, an eerie humming silence, a trading floor that looks busy but feels lifeless. People clicking, typing, adjusting spreadsheets, not to produce results, but to appear productive. Welcome to the surreal world of corporate stagnation, dressed up in suits and fluorescent lighting. Now picture this. You're surrounded by professionals who've mastered the art of inaction. Their golden rule: never finish your work, because if you do, they'll just give you more. It's not laziness, it's survival. It's the unspoken code of our system where meaning has long since left the building. Let's zoom out. This isn't just Tokyo. You'll find echoes of this everywhere. A tech firm in San Francisco where nobody knows what the product actually does. A consulting team in Berlin rearranging PowerPoints for presentations no one reads. Or a bureaucratic office in Nairobi where approvals take months because that's just the way things are. In this world, the danger isn't stress. It's the slow decay of identity. You stop asking questions. You stop trying. You start fading. That's what happened to one high-flying trader who, despite landing a lucrative assignment in Japan, found himself drifting into a kind of existential twilight. No meaningful work, no feedback. Just spreadsheets, silence, and the occasional passive-aggressive boss breathing down his neck. What began as boredom turned physical. His health collapsed, weight dropped, digestion failed. He wasn't just burnt out, he was just being erased. And the system, it didn't care, as long as he showed up and didn't make waves, until he did. You see, there comes a point when a person breaks, but not always downward. Sometimes the break is upward. A moment of clarity that says, I can't do this anymore, and I won't. For our trader, that moment came quietly. A decision to leave, to work in charity, to reclaim his life. But in the corporate world, freedom isn't just a resignation letter away, especially when money, power, and pride are on the line. What followed was a psychological chess match. A series of veiled threats from former mentors, strategic retreats under the label of medical leave, and an endless loop of HR meetings designed to wear him down. One move, then another. The system was trying to outlast him, and just when it thought it had, he went rogue. Emails to executives with scripture, cryptic warnings, and poetic chaos. It wasn't sabotage. It was strategy. If they feared he might unravel publicly, they'd pay to make him go away quietly. And eventually, they did. In a strange, darkly comedic twist, the final move wasn't a dramatic courtroom battle or a tell-all expose. It was a quiet departure, a digital nod in a global conference call, and a question that lingered like a ghost. So, who won? There was a pause. Click. Gary won, and in that moment, with muted mics and stifled laughter, the illusion cracked. Because sometimes, walking away is the most powerful statement you can make. Sometimes, choosing your own path, health over prestige, peace over paycheck, isn't a retreat, it's a revolution. So if you ever find yourself trapped in a system that rewards emptiness, remember this: you don't have to lose yourself to win. Final summary. The main takeaway of this book, To the Trading Game by Gary Stevenson, is that modern finance has become disconnected from economic reality, rewarding traders who bet against shared prosperity. Stevenson's journey from working-class Ilford through the gleaming towers of finance reveals how the industry's most profitable wages are often bets on inequality and diminishing opportunities for the middle class. His troubling insight that central banks would keep interest rates near zero indefinitely because average people were becoming permanently poorer made him millions even as it hollowed him from within. In the end, his battle to escape the system with his deferred compensation intact mirrored his trading philosophy. Survive long enough for your analysis to be proven right. Today, Stevenson uses his insider knowledge to advocate for economic equality, running his YouTube channel Gary Economics and contributing to policy debates in major media outlets. His story illuminates not just one trader's rise and fall, but a rigged financial system designed to funnel wealth upward while leaving ordinary people behind. Okay, that's it for this video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please take the time to leave us a rating. We always appreciate your feedback. See you in the next video.